Good evening, everyone. Kerr's Rage, Part 1 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga. By me. Episode 9, July 23rd, 2020. We start out at One-Eyed Jack's. One-Eyed Jack's is a tavern where the story begins, narrated by the old gnome, Kalor Starseeker. I got the inspiration from Rudyard Kipling's book, Puck of Pook's Hill, for this style of storytelling. Okay, let us begin. One-Eyed Jack's. So Carmen was both a soldier and a holy woman, Sonia said, and you were a sorcerer's apprentice. Exactly. You never told us that you were a real thief, Garrett said. Even stealing pastries seems like such roguery. I was young, and I thought that I was outsmarting Miss Jasmine. It took me many years to realize how wrong such thinking is. You said that you'd finished telling us how Vlad ended up in Fermanor. Of course, Eric. But it was a long time ago, and I only know what Vlad told me, as I sat helplessly chained in his dungeon. It was as if he needed to tell someone, even someone like me, his enemy. But wasn't he afraid that you'd tell others what he told you? At that time, he was in total control of his world, and I was his prisoner. I'd be dead within a day or two of fighting in the arena, and then his secrets would die with me. Why did he need to tell anyone? I guess that Vlad, like most people, could only keep so many secrets locked within himself. Or maybe he just needed someone to witness his secret victories. Secret victories? Yes, despite the dangers, the Dragonian Parliament knew nothing about Vlad's quest for the staff, although a few members of his Drakkar Noir did. The Parliament frowned on such personal agendas, and if Vlad failed to keep his plans a secret, then his life would be forfeit. Did he fail? Polly asked. That's a story for another day. But for now, let me tell you how Vlad came to Fermanor and how he was given a command of an entire company of Drakkar Noir. Drakkar Noir? Hunters of the Night. Shangsun Province, Dragonian Military Academy, during the summer month of Silva, 2032. Two dark elf fighters stood at opposite sides of a sand-filled arena. Sweat glistened off their dark-skinned bodies. Blood-streaked faces locked against one another in a test of wills. The stockier of the two stood crouched in a deep horse stance, preferring its strength and protection to the tall silver dragon stance of his lighter, yet taller opponent. Each dark elf searched for the other's weak point. An opening could present itself at any time, and a successful attack could only be initiated at the precise moment. They had been sparring for some time, and their breaths were coming in ragged gasps. Sitting on a plain wooden bench above them was a dark elfar man of untold age, his long hair hanging thin and gray about his shoulders. Despite his apparent age, he sat tall and strong, the muscles of his forearms lean and sinewy like the bark of a mighty tree. His eyes looked upon his fighters with interest, but betrayed no favorites. He was a master. The tallest of the two recovered the most quickly. He had lightning reflexes and spider-like agility. Catching his foe off guard, he slammed a combination of battering blows into his rival, forcing him to backpedal. His heavier opponent could do little except raise up his arms to defend himself. He was just a hair too slow. The lighter elf pivoted expertly upon his right and forward foot, sliding a series of shovel punch, left hook combinations into his rival's head and abdomen that sent him reeling. But the more heavily muscled elf was no beginner in this conflict. Rushing backward in an expert escape maneuver, he nearly succeeded in regaining his balance. Yet his fatigue slowed him, and in his haste, he compromised his balance for a split second, catching his heel in the sand of the practice arena. With his enemy atop of him, he couldn't recover, and he fell hard. It was his 10th fall, and he knew that he was beaten. 10 falls to 6. The victor stepped forward and extended his hand, helping the loser to his feet. Wiping volumes of sweat from their faces, they bowed respectfully to each other and then to their master. Their sparring match had lasted nearly 30 minutes, with neither elf willing to give up an inch of ground. "Well done, Derek," Vlad said. "It was an excellent match. One of our best." Slapping his winded partner on the back, he tried to ease his pain of defeat. "It was my honor, Vlad," Derek said. "Although your skills have grown to far surpass my own, you were toying with me." "Hardly, Derek. Thrice you sent me to the sand before I'd given you but one fall. My desperation gave me strength." "You honor the Dark Elfar with your skill," Vlad said in an effort to protect the self-esteem of his lifelong friend. "The honor is all mine, Vlad." "Enough of this ridiculous banter," their master ordered. "You rattle on like children when there is still work to be done." Seeing that it was once again time to be serious, both of them stood rigidly at attention. In the span of a heartbeat, their concentration was fully focused. Their red and black training uniforms were soaked with sweat, and their dark black hair lay wet and matted about their shoulders. 7 dragons form, their master instructed. Bowing in unison, they moved in sync with the grace of professional dancers. The form was a long series of attacking and defensive movements that required great strength and endurance to complete. It was even longer and more demanding, however, when performed after a half-hour sparring match. Soon after their form was completed, they breathed inward sighs of relief, thinking that their training session was over. Master Dragon had other ideas. Luckily for them, graduation was only a few months away. And yes, of course, in Ker's Rage, there is Kung Fu. Okay. One-Eyed Jacks. "So Vlad was a boxer too?" Eric asked. "He wasn't merely a boxer," I said. "He was a talented martial artist. His entire body was a weapon, and his mind was exceptionally quick and cunning." "What else did he and Derek do at the academy?" "Many things, but the most important thing that happened to them there was when they found the rod of the staff." "That was one of the things that the Duaredheim ship told Vlad about," Garrett said. "Yes, it was. But I thought it went something like, 'The rod bound the 4 into one, and its wardens were the dark elves in their secret halls of stone.'" "Very good. But what was it doing there at the academy?" "Remember," I said, "that the dark elves had come again to the surface world, and they brought many of the items that they coveted along with them." "But if it was so special," Polly said, "how did Derek and Vlad get it?" "It was special, but the Dark Elfar had possessed the rod for ages, and in the span of lifetimes its true power was forgotten. And, perhaps by destiny or luck, it had found its way into the archives of the Academy." "And Vlad realized what it was because of his experiences inside the ship," Polly said. "And because it was forgotten, no one even knew that it was missing when they took it." "That's precisely what Vlad anticipated. And with the rod in his possession, only 4 pieces of the staff remained to be found. Indeed, when they realized its nature, Vlad believed that he had found his destiny, and his mind was filled with visions of grandeur." "So that's when Vlad began his plans for uniting the staff," Eric said. "Yes, and he knew that 2 more pieces of it were hidden somewhere in the northern reaches region of Firminor. The gem slept beneath the iron talons of Modrul, Lord of the Dragons, and the ship had shown him the whereabouts of the dragon's mountain lair. But he still needed the scepter to locate it exactly, and it was protected by the Arcanist Magus, an ancient witch's coven that had once dwelled somewhere in the Ogre-Fang Mountains." "That's the northern boundary of Lord Sherrick's lands," Garrett noted. "But how did Vlad know that he would end up anywhere near the 2 items?" Polly asked. "Vlad knew that his graduating class was going to be split into 2 companies. One of them would join Dragonia's navy in its struggle to colonize the shattered continent, and the other would be assigned to the Northern Reaches campaign. The latter was the most difficult, for it involved subverting their Red Orcan allies and forming them into a cohesive army against Firminor. What if he ended up in the navy? Vlad knew that the head of their class would be given the most difficult assignment, and he had only one rival in that regard. To Vlad, his master's decision was a test of his destiny. If they chose him, he was certain that the staff would one day be his to command. What was his opponent's name? His rival's name was Anselme de Marchance. He and Vlad were nearly identical in their academic skills and physical abilities. Only one thing separated them in the minds of their mentors. That one thing became painfully apparent on the day of their graduation. Graduation. Shantou Province, Wyvern Castle, Southern Dragonia. The graduation ceremony of the Drakkar Noir, the first day of Sanguis, 2032. The Drakkar Noir was the most elite fighting unit within the Dragonian military. Their ranks were hand-picked and tested from the most promising Dark Elfar youth, and then extensively trained by the finest teachers. They were instructed in all forms of martial discipline, including leadership techniques, political intrigue, and battle tactics. In addition, each student was trained in those specialties for which they showed exceptional aptitude. Great fighters became masters of their bodies and weapons, and those born with gifts of the mind were shaped and molded through teachings in academics and sorcery. Still others were trained in the secret techniques of espionage and assassination. Few other details need be known, save that the Drakkar Noir were the most deadly and effective weapons that the Dragonian Empire ever created. Vlad Lucheron and his faithful companion, Derek Al-Luan, were among the ranks of those students aspiring to become members of that elite society. They and several others had completed the final tests of mind and body. This was their graduation day, the day when they would cease to be called students and become members of the Drakkar Noir. Out of 100 pupils, only 20 had passed their final tests, and of those 20, only 2 would be given the honor of immediate command. The remaining graduates would join their elected leaders as allies and advisors within their command until the day came when they too would be chosen as leaders. It was a tradition of reward and position that spanned millennia. The ceremony commenced at noon. Many of the highest-ranking Dragonian officials were present. Foremost among them was Queen Afra de la Chalet, Queen of Dragonia, and chief advisor for the Northern Reaches campaign of Fermanagh. Also notable was High Council member Lord Lencorian Duaredheim, first Prince of the Empire. Lord Lencorian would become heir to the throne should his sister Corina die, and as such, he possessed great power. All told, 100 High Council members were present within the open cathedral of Drakthul Akar, the secret meeting hall of the Drakkar Noir. The graduates had traveled from the Dragonian Military Academy at Shangsun to the mighty Wyvern Castle of Shantou. Drakthul Akar was a hidden chamber far below the protective walls of the castle. It was a place where heroes were born. The council members all wore the deep purple sashes denoting their positions of nobility. Silver insignia designating their military rank could be found upon their collars and left shoulder. None of the leaders present were less than captains, and several high commanders could be found. Their skin and hair were ebon, and many of them had long manes resplendent with gold and silver jewelry. Only with great age did their hair turn white, and these elders were treated with the greatest respect for their wisdom. Their eyes were as varied in color as the rainbow. Their eyes were a testament to their difficult past. The Dark Elfar had a great history. Their forefathers had once walked among the clouds of tempest, but in those dawning days, fate dealt with them harshly, and they were banished to live forever in the absence of sunlight. Deep in the bowels of under earth, they faced many dangers and nearly ceased to exist as a people. But in time they grew in power and learned how to wield the magic contained within the stony bowels of the earth. Ever did they yearn for the surface world and the wonder of the light, but so far from the sun, the gods of light were of no help to them, and so they found shelter by embracing the goddess Lothdea. There, in their dark kingdoms, built of their ancestors' blood, their bodies adapted to the strange energies that they found there, and their eyes learned to see in a world without light. They survived and they conquered, and in time they became the rulers of the dark. And when they deemed that their strength was great enough, they came again to the surface world and found not the gods that had banished them, but rather they found victory after victory. For who could stand against the masters of the night, they who were guided by Lothdea's own hand? Through alliance and conquest, they had united an entire continent, and they named it Dragonia. For 400 years, it had been the mightiest empire on Tempest, and its influence was ever spreading. Now, after 4 centuries, the sun was once again changing their eyes, and eyes that had once held no pigment were now turning bright shades of blue, gold, and green. Such were the dark elven eyes of this council, a body of warriors who were once again able to see by the light of day. Behind each of those eyes a fire burned, a flaming memory of their banishment from the light, and a determination that such a defeat would never threaten their people again. The ceremony began with Lord Lencorian's command, "Begin the march!" Their instructors led the graduates into the vast hall. Their black uniforms were immaculate, and their hair was unadorned except for a silver clasp, marking them as high-ranking students. Their sashes were the gold of youth, which on this day would be changed to the purple of Dragonian officers. Their eyes burned with youthful ambition, and their bodies were well conditioned from endless physical training. They marched past their noble teachers and taskmasters, who watched them from the cathedral's benches. The formation came to a halt upon the ceremony floor, standing at attention before the High Council. Queen Afra rose from her central chair, with the graduating class facing her. She was ancient, even by Dark Alfar standards. Her hair flowed long and silver over her age-bent back, and her eyes were without pigment, save that from the blood that flowed through them. But despite her age, she was perhaps the most feared leader of the council, for it was she who'd first heard the voice of Lothdea and saved their people from the terrible darkness of Under-Earth. But as their days of banishment faded from their memories with the passage of time, fewer of their children heard the voice of the goddess. Indeed, it was rumored that many Dark Alfar were beginning to hear the voices of the gods of light. Such thoughts greatly troubled the queen. Today, we are assembled here to honor our most gifted students and to welcome them among the ranks of Dragonia's finest leaders. They are to be Drakar Noir, hunters of the night. And the entire hall was filled with pride and hushed with passion. She continued, "Once we were many, but then our enemies plotted against us, and in their treachery we were cast down and forced to flee into darkness. There we found many horrors and enemies untold, but through the inner strength and the pride of our people we survived. And in those days we were blessed by Lothdea, and she taught us the power of the dark, and soon we grew in numbers and in might. And now the Dark Alfar are a stronger people than ever before. In time, all over the world will learn of our power, and Dragonia will grow so that nothing will ever again threaten our survival. The Drakar Noir represent the greatest among us. They are our most gifted role models, a legacy of perfection by which all Dark Alfar should strive to achieve. To our enemies, you will be a legend, something that they will fear whenever they walk in the dark. In darkness, we found our greatest strength, and in darkness we will achieve our ultimate victory. Today, you will become Drakar Noir. Long live Dragonia. Long live the hunters of the night." Raising her arms to greet the audience's cheers, she then slowly and dramatically lowered them. The final ceremony was about to begin. Lord Lencorian and his advisors joined her. "Two of you have been chosen to lead the rest in our battle against the enemy," she began. "This is our custom, and this is our law. Vlad Lucheron is first to be chosen. Step forward, Vlad." and he marched with great discipline to kneel before his queen. It is with great honor that I did bestow upon you the rank of captain and commander of the Drakar Noir in the Northern Reaches campaign. You have proven your talents time and again in your training and in your valiant actions in the Andrian Isles. I will assign 9 others to accompany you during your future mission. They will be your voice and your hands. Please rise and assume the rank of captain and commander of the Drakar Noir. Rising slowly, he could hardly contain the honor that he felt, for out of 20 he was first chosen, just as he had planned, if only his father could see him now. The queen then called forth his 9 lieutenants. She and Lord Lancorian would then bestow their new rank upon them. Derek Al-Lawan was the first of the 9 to be selected. He was Vlad's most trusted friend and ally. Always did they test each other's skill. Kneeling before the queen, he could barely control his excitement, nor could he conceal his willingness to follow his comrade. He was the first of the 9, and although they would all receive the rank of lieutenant, there would always be the hidden idea of superiority behind the order in which they were chosen. Derek Al-Lawan, the queen said, you are hereby given the rank of first lieutenant to Commander Vlad Lucheron. Rise and receive your honor. He rose. Lord Lancorian removed his sash of gold. Do you hereby pledge an oath, the queen asked, to preserve the sacred laws of Dragonia, and to follow the orders of your commander under penalty of your own life? I do, my lady. And Lord Lancorian girded him with a sash of purple. The ceremony continued, and the queen appointed Vlad's remaining lieutenants. All of them were honored to accept their new titles, and of the remaining 8, Ariana Queensdaughter was second only to Derek. She had surrendered her family name to become one of Lothia's chosen, and her God-given powers were great. She was also a great sorceress. Elric Duaredheim was next. Coming from a highly ranked family, he was a great asset to his new company. He was a fine swordsman and dabbler in the magic of the surface world. His most esteemed comrade was fourth to be chosen, and his name was Shirin Kuldrun, master of weapons. Fifth to join Vlad's company was the oldest student in the class, but at 403 years of age, she was still young for a dark elf. She was renowned for her gift of future sight, and during her time at the academy, she had become an expert in the secret dark elfar methods of night fighting as well. Her acceptance into the school was something of a mystery to the other students, for she seemed at times truly innocent and naive. But it was whispered that the queen herself had enrolled her, perhaps to fulfill some strange agenda known only to a few. Andriel Dunorum, your gift of sight has brought us many victories in the past, and now your gift will bring us conquest in Fermanor as well. Stand beside your commander. Sixth was Dorlin Varul, an acrobat who excelled in the dragon style of martial arts. He had few equals in hand-to-hand fighting. The next to be chosen were Olak Tempestus and Draco Pertinax. Olak was a skilled swordsman and archer, and Draco was a master in all forms of espionage and political intrigue. He would be a great asset to Vlad and a master technician. Last but not the least to be selected was Monica Elfar, the silk-haired. Learned in Red Orcan tribal ways and culture, she was also a tough fighter and a student of sorcery. All in all, they would make a formidable team in Vlad's upcoming campaign. They would be the leaders of Dragonia's forces in their next invasion. They would lead Dragonia to victory in the Northern Reaches War. The second team of students was to be led by Vlad's greatest adversary in the academy, Anselm de Marchance. His skills were almost identical to Vlad's, but he possessed a tremendous ego, and this flaw had prevented him from being first chosen. Because of this, he would forever resent Vlad and vie against him at the first opportunity. Nevertheless, the High Council could not ignore his great assets, and he was granted the rank of captain and commander of the Drakar Noir, assigned to colonizing the shattered continent in the South Sea. The council purposefully stationed him thousands of miles away from Vlad, so that their personal rivalry would never counteract their efforts in Dragonia's behalf. The 9 chosen to join Anselm's ranks were similar in skills and power to those of Vlad's company. They were also known to favor Anselm over Vlad. Such rivalry was a part of Dark Elven society, an element of their culture that had developed during centuries of competing to survive. For how can one's skill improve if one's enemies are too weak to challenge him? The ceremony ended with proud words from Lord Lancorian, the Queen, and many of the High Council members. A great feast and entertainment were prepared for them that night, and all their wants and desires were provided for them. Their newly acquired rank made them greatly appealing to the lesser-ranking students of the opposite sex, and many of them found pleasure in their newly discovered power. Their celebration was short-lived, however, for in the span of days they would have to say farewell to family and friends and venture out upon their appointed missions. They knew that many of them would never again return to the shores of Dragonia alive. But that was part of the great sacrifice. It was part of being Drakkar Noir. On the 7th day of the blood moon, they set sail upon mighty dragon ships. Each group left Shantou Harbor on separate vessels, heading west towards their destinations. Vlad's group headed northwest toward the North Sea and the northern reaches of Fermanor, with 2 full companies of Dark Alpha warriors, while Anselm's troop headed southeast toward the shattered continent and the imminent battle with the savages that lived there. And then we return to the party of Kalor and Kirkegg border. Onward to Thieves' Town. Leander awoke to the sound of One-Eye's prize rooster's strumpet. The bird's brazen cock-a-doodle-doo struck his hungover body like the great lance of a cavalier. The idea of riding 3 days to Thieves' Town didn't seem like such an exciting adventure anymore. Going to the window overlooking the street below, he looked up to see the pale blue of a clear morning sky. The fair breeze that blew around him further lowered his spirits. No way to talk Carmen out of it now, he thought. Damn, my head hurts. Pouring himself some water from a large pitcher on his bed table, he drank deeply. He was about to pour himself the last of it when Dartin's snoring brought about a sudden inspiration. It suddenly became apparent that Dartin had never made it to his bunk the night before. There was only one way to wake him, and that was with nice cold water. Blah! Dartin sputtered. What the? Enough! Looking up, he saw only the wide grin upon his friend's face. He rose suddenly to grapple with his unsuspected attacker until he was forcefully struck by the lancing effects of One-Eye's prize-winning ale. Sitting back down, he wished silently for a quick and painless death. Oh no, I'm not going. No way. Leander opened the shutters wide to let in the first rays of sunrise. The faint eastern outline of Sanguis was visible just above the rise of Tempest's sun. Oh no, no, Dartin said comically as he saw the clear skies and knowing look upon Leander's face. They were going, if ever he knew Carmen's one-track paladin mind. By mid-morning, the reunited team was awake. The horses saddled, bags packed, and waiting to begin their journey outside of the tavern. They had eaten a hearty breakfast and paid One-Eye 2 platinum pieces for his services. They wished Sonia and the other barmaids farewell. Give him hell, was all that the old veteran said to them. It was clear that he didn't expect them to return from so perilous of a journey. Departing from the inn, they said their final farewells to all their old friends. And then, next episode, we'll begin with the North Sea chapter, page 117. And remember, as always, tell your friends and for yourself, read Kerr's Rage, part 1 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga, and all its following novels by me. Have a great night.